Yeah. It's still gonna be. It's their bad, tell a story about it.
Oh, that's.
Yeah, they all. Oh my God, that's the most. But it's. Oh, yeah. Okay. On that picture, just, you know. All right, it is June 17th, 2024. It's 5:45 p.m. We're gonna call this finance committee meeting to order. Present are council members Lang, Cost, Chu, Hauser, and Marmy. First item is the unappropriated balance is at $727,195. And the balance of the budget stabilization fund is at $716,018. First item on our agenda is a request for appropriation in the amount of $1,350.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Hope the day finds you well. The several pieces are, Mr. Chair, are relating to the city's health insurance fund. We were made aware in May that there are some strains on that fund, so we immediately tried to determine what the causative factors were and some kind of remedial action to prop that fund up. It's a lot of moving pieces and parts, so I sent an email trying to give as much detail as I could, certainly answer any follow-up questions you had, but we are facing inflationary pressures. We had metrics in the fourth quarter of last year. We built in some safeguards that we felt could get us through 24 and sustain those pressures without any additional appropriation from the legislative body. 5 months in, things continue to erode and we need some help in that fund. So again, there's a lot of detail. Certainly want to answer your questions.
Motion by Lang. Second by Hauser. Questions? Okay, so, we kind of figured this out in May, and that's our first indication of when this happened, because I know that we had to take money out of the rainy day fund, the budget stabilization fund, in order to make sure of things. So why did it get to that point?
So the Department of Human Resources doesn't track the ins and outs. We're a facilitator, get an invoice from MedBen, sent to treasurer, to the auditor, back to us. Don't have spending authority, don't watch that cash account. What I watch is claims experiences, what we're spending on our pharmacy, those types of things. What I do think we need to talk about as the year goes on is a COLA. So it's always difficult to come up and ask you for additional money, but I don't think we're going to need it. But I do think we need to talk about a COLA. I'm Chaz, our mayor. I'd like to wait later in the year because there's a changing of federal spending priorities due to the election. Might be some things to consider, but this is why it got as low as it did when it did. I just don't have the end of the details for that.
Okay. I guess what I'm asking for then is a procedure or system implement it, put it into place, because we should never be caught behind and have to pull from our budget stabilization. Somebody needs to be monitoring it. And if we need to legislate who monitors it, then we have to do that, but. You know, here we have to pay for it, and we didn't pass that on because the employees pay a portion of it and the city pays the rest. When we get behind like this, we have to make it all up. The city pays 100%, and that's not the way the plan's supposed to work. So I guess what I'm asking for is a system that we put into place that ensures that we don't get behind like this. We should never be at a detriment with that fund, because we have the authority to pass that on to the employees portion in the city. Yes, we can increase ours, and we're gonna increase ours at the same time as the employees. I'm not saying change the percentage, I'm just saying sometimes we need to have COLAs or whatever we need to do. But I guess I'm asking for some kind of stopgap to make sure that we don't have to pull from the budget stabilization ever again.
Agree with everything you just said. What I've tried hard to do is stay in my lane. We're working great with the auditor's office. Jack and Jim, they've been great to work with. Help us understand the numbers. The question is, where does that lawful authority lie? And I don't know this Department of Human Resources. I don't have money. I can't appropriate, I can't transfer, I can't spend those monies. We merely facilitate a invoice. And again, treasurer, auditor, we'll work closely with whomever in the building, because I do agree with you, it's good to be caught off guard. And it's not enjoyable to go ask for money,
Right.
but I get it.
Well, here's the thing, benefits fall under HR, so my ask is that that's where it should lie. And that then you should get a report every single month. And in order to make sure it's monitored, if you don't have access to the numbers, then we need to set up a report that's sent to you on a monthly basis at a minimum, if not every pay period, as far as where that stands.
Our auditor staff has been wonderful to work with. I'll be happy to reach out to Jackie in the morning and see if we can get some kind of reporting mechanism. Jackie, auditor here.
Yeah,
Yeah, I just so we're very clear, because I know some of you are new to this, Doug's not. HR has full access to these numbers. They manage benefit. They're the ones that deal with this amendment. So it's not this falls under their department.
okay. Yeah, we just need to make sure that we're tracking that, and then, because we should have a stopgap as far as we should never let it go below a certain amount to make sure that we have enough funds in there. That was when it was set up, when Bob Lehman set this whole system up. It really was a huge benefit to the city. But yeah, if we need to make sure that we're keeping up with the cost of it by making, the price of health insurance has increased, and our fund doesn't always increase the same as health insurance cost does. We've tried to make it manageable and the most affordable as we can. We try to keep those low. But I guess my ask is just to make sure that we remain solvent, because our budget stabilization should not have to pull us out of that.
We'd be happy to collaborate with the auditor's office, take
Sure.
into the information provided. I agree with you philosophically.
Okay.
We want to stay ahead of it.
Yeah.
You and I don't like surprises.
Yeah. Okay, very good.
Okay.
Any further questions and or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, send us on the full council, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. The motion passes 5-0. Just in the sake of time, all of these are the same thing that was just discussed. So the next item on the agenda is a request for appropriation amount of $83,800. Entertain a motion. So moved. Second. Motion by Lang, second by Hauser. Questions and or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, send us on the full council, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 5-0. Next one is a request for appropriation, $362. Entertain the motion. Second. Motion by Lang, second by Hauser. Questions and or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, send us on the full council, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Next item is, motion passes 5-0. Next item is request appropriation amount of $24,700. Entertain a motion. Motion. Second. Motion by Lang, second by Hauser. Any questions and or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, send us on the full council, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 5-0. Next item is a request for appropriation of $36,410. Motion.
Second.
Motion by Lang, second by Hauser. Questions and or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, send us on the full council, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Next item is a request for appropriation amount $265. Motion. Motion by Lang, second by Hauser. Questions and or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, send us on the full council, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. That motion passes 5-0. And the last one is a request for appropriation, the amount of $5,800. Motion. Motion by Lang, second by Hauser. Questions and or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, send us on the full council, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. That motion passes 5-0. Just to explain why we have those all separate, they're different departments, different entities, so we had to do them separately because of the different budget items.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Director. Appreciate it. With that, this finance committee meeting stands adjourned. Next up is streets.
All right, it is 5:54. I'd like to call this street committee meeting to order. Present are council members Hauser, Shute sitting in for Labutus, Rath, Ryan, Blind, Lang, and our
Point of order. Only the ward positions are allowed on streets. I don't believe that you can have anybody sit in. We've never done that before. I mean, that's just always how we've done traditionally. I don't know if it's law or anything like that, but we've never had anybody in because you already have enough as far as numbers.
that is fine. We will go ahead and strike it from the record that Shute is sitting in for Labutus. All right, our first and only item on the agenda is ordinance 2422, an ordinance vacating a portion of Iron Avenue running west from Van Voorhees Street. Said street is right of way, is located north of 3838 Iron Avenue.
Thank you. This is a request that came in from the property owner on the south side of that portion of Iron Avenue. He's signed a petition along with the property owners on the west and on the north side, so we got no objections to this one. We sent it around to our site plan review committee, which includes the police and fire department, so we recommend moving this forward for vacation.
Any other questions or comments from the committee?
Yeah, this property owner is a great guy, and I'd like to thank Ms. Moorhead and his department for their work on that. Because this is gonna bring another piece of security to that area, and I really appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Any other questions or comments?
Make a motion. Sorry.
Motion by Marmy. All right, all those in favor signify by saying yes. Or aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That passes 6-0. And that concludes the street committee. Next up is safety.
Let's see, like,
And we'll bring the safety committee meeting to order. Present tonight, myself, Thomas, Hauser, Ryan, Rath, and Chu, and for Labutus. First issue we're going to consider is ordinance number 24-23. An ordinance amending chapter 850 of the codified ordinances of the city of Newark, Ohio, to impose licensing requirements for adult use of marijuana facilities.
Mr. Chair, thank you. So I wanted to bring this ordinance to the safety committee. Thank you for your time. This was the original licensing legislation I had always hoped to bring forward, with the idea being access and information. Want to make sure that our safety forces have access to these facilities, want to make sure that we're getting all the proper information. We made a number of changes throughout the legislation to include adult use. So just going through some of the things we did in the definitions, we've added adult use, make sure they're covered by this legislation. We updated the licensing requirement. You see the way it was originally worded, you just had to first obtain a license. Now you actually need to maintain a license, which is important. When I get to one of these other sections, I'll explain it a little more. Scrolling down to the section on licensing applications and fees. So it was important that we updated some of the responsibilities relative to getting your license renewed to ensure that our safety director doesn't have to go chasing people down. So we've stiffened the penalty and ensured that you have to every year provide a new application. So you get updated information from the different dispensaries and different facilities. And you have to renew that application. So you have to submit a new application, you have to submit a $500 fee by January 1st every year. If you don't, safety director will issue a cease of operations to your facility and shut you down. And if you continue to operate after you've been sent that notice, there are penalties, and I'll get to that at the end. As part of the renewal application process, again, you have to every year get that application approved again. So then in 850.05, I'm just kind of scrolling down the sections. We added some language to allow folks to appeal the decisions of the safety director using the administrative code sections, and our law department can speak to more about what that process entails. But we do have a separate section for how our process would be handled if we had a decision of the safety director to reject somebody that would otherwise qualify. 850.06 is a really important section. I think a big part of this. This is where we're updating our implied consent to search. So if you open up a dispensary, you are giving the safety director and the police an implied consent to come search your facility at any time. Making sure you maintain that access and allow access in for the safety forces to come in and review your facility. So then in 850.07, we go through the grounds for, we didn't really spell this out before, when a safety director should not issue a license and when they should issue a license. So in section A, we say if you're not properly licensed by the state, if you're found to be non-compliant with any state or city code, if you're located in an area where marijuana facility is prohibited, if you haven't received your conditional zoning from Board of Zoning, all of those are grounds for your license not being accepted or not being renewed. So that happens again every year, even if you are accepted the first time. Now, section B, you could have all of those items. You can be in compliance with state and city code. You can have your conditional zoning be located in the right spot. The safety director can still refuse your application, and he can say his grounds for that and then take it to council. And so then what we did in section B there is we laid out that process. So if the safety director has an issue, they would notify the clerk of council that, hey, I'm refusing somebody who otherwise has a state license, otherwise meets all of our zoning requirements, but I'm still going to reject them, and here's why. Upon getting that notice, the clerk is going to schedule a public hearing. And the thought behind the timing of that was at least 15 days. So there's enough time for everybody to kind of prepare and get their ducks in a row, but no more than 30 days because we don't want to just let this thing sit out there forever, right? So once we schedule the hearing, we want to make sure there's notice back to the person who's being rejected that this public hearing is going to happen.
And then once we get to the public hearing, a vote of 7 votes of council will be required to affirm the decision of the safety director. And the thought being there, when you look at our other rules as far as how many votes it takes to do certain things, 7 votes is generally reserved for the more extreme actions of council, which I think in this instance would be, we could be shutting down an ongoing business that hasn't done anything wrong according to the state or our zoning code. So treating this much like we do an emergency, piece of legislation, things of that nature seemed appropriate. If we are in a situation where you have an existing facility that is being now rejected, they can continue operating while this process plays out. The thought being, obviously, that decision needs to be affirmed before we can really shut them down. And then if council doesn't affirm that decision, if somebody's in compliance with the state requirements, the city requirements, zoning requirements, we would go ahead and issue them a license. 85008 then adds penalties. So as it was explained to me, under existing code, if we don't really specify, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but if we don't specify a penalty, it defaults to kind of the lowest level misdemeanor. It's a $150 fine, no jail time, anything like that. We felt that if somebody's operating without a city license, they're opening up a dispensary, or their license wasn't renewed and they continue operating, more severe penalties were appropriate in that situation. So those scenarios would, or the other one would be if our police is going to, if they're gonna do a search and they're not permitted access. Anybody who doesn't fall in line with those 2 provisions will be guilty of a first-degree misdemeanor, which carries with it $1,000 penalty and up to 6 months in jail. So those are some pretty strong, and I guess to take a step back, I've never felt that I would like to see one on every street corner. This, I think, is not about trying to find a way to expand or have a whole slew of dispensaries everywhere. I think that's what our zoning code's for. Really, the focus of this legislation, I think, should be to provide information and access, ensure that we're talking with the safety forces, they're getting that information updated every year. And then we can look to our zoning code, which, still needs to be finalized and go through planning commission when we talk about limits on where they can.
Any comments?
Question. Under 85008, under penalties, you said it was for the first degree misdemeanor with $1,000 fine up to 6 months, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so that's anybody selling marijuana of any form without a license.
So I don't think this would supersede criminal code, right? So I think all of those felonies for, continuing, and certainly want to ask our law department on that, but the intent here is really, this misdemeanor is just for violating this statute, opening up a dispensary without a city license. You could still be subject to other criminal penalties, I think. You're, just out selling weed on the street corner.
Do these penalties increase based on the number of offenses?
So it's. No, I mean, it would just be repeated. I don't know how I'm not a criminal attorney by any stretch, so I couldn't tell you if you violate this, if it keeps continuing to go up, we'll certainly welcome any thoughts from the law department.
Yeah, certainly, if you would note, Councilman, in 85008, it does indicate that each separate day could be a accruing offense. I'm not aware of any ratcheting like an OBI or something like that, where you have enough to go up over a period of time. I don't think this speaks to that. But I was not a part of creating this, but as it reads on its face, per day, you can't be charged with this and one equivalent offense if you continue by.
Okay, that's the follow-up question.
Absolutely.
So this refers to dispensaries. We have vape shops everywhere, and vape shops sell whatever it is that they sell. Whatever the vape shop is selling. Actual marijuana. Does that go to a criminal code? Does this affect that?
So this one speaks to, at least on its face, the dispensaries themselves, possession and trafficking of marijuana are separate offenses. Probably fall under at least beginning of misdemeanor level, could become a felony depending on what it is. I would think, given the review of this, that this speaks more to those businesses that are geared towards selling.
Yeah, this is the legal marijuana is what we're talking about here. If it's a black market illegal, then it would fall under the criminal. This is only the legalized adult use.
try to understand it. I don't know how that supply chain works. So I don't know if vape shops or something, smoke shops,
They
they
cannot.
could have access.
That it's a controlled substance, has to be grown, cultivated, everything.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Any other questions? Tom?
Yeah, I have one quick question. So you mentioned that in order to overturn a decision made by the safety director, it would require 7-3 majority on council, is that correct?
7 votes to affirm or his decision. So if he's refusing to issue or her. If the safety director is refusing somebody who's issued a license by the state, meets their zoning requirements, and they're refusing that license, that decision to refuse would need to be affirmed by 7 votes. Okay.
My question was the same vein as that, was there? Seems like in a lot of instances in the code, you would vote to overturn rather to affirm. It seems as though that vote of 7 votes to affirm the safety director really isn't giving the safety director as much discretion as he or she would have if you were voting to overturn. So what was the thought behind that?
Yeah, I mean, and our state directors here can certainly speak for what he'd like to see on this, but as far as the vote goes, I think. At the end of the day, you're affirming the decision to shut down somebody who would otherwise qualify to operate, right? And there was never an intent to give the safety director a ton of power and discretion. The idea here is the safety director can raise his hand and say, hey, wait, this one doesn't look good, and bring it before council. But I think ultimately, the safety director wants that decision made by council and not by the safety director himself, because it's a situation where you're shutting down a business, right? So.
Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Safety Director, do you have anything you'd like to say? Your office has been addressed or mentioned several times.
In regards to this particular piece of
Yes.
legislation? No, well, let me step up here. Not necessarily in regards to this particular piece of legislation, but I'll try not to knock that over. Yeah, as far as the vote to overturn any decision, is there to affirm any decision that the safety director would make? That's at the discretion of council. I really have no opinion on that one way or another. I mean, it's 70%, that'd be 70% of the vote, so that's a decision for you folks to make. Our concern has to do with any sort of cap, and whether or not we limit the number of facilities that we have in the city for now. So I don't know if you want me to expound on that or have a seat and we'll discuss it later or whatever. Maybe we should look at that, with the other piece of legislation. Thank you. I've got to be honest with you, I'm concerned that there is no reference to where the dispensaries can be or how many of them there can be, and I think that's the basic difference between how we're all viewing this.
And if I may, Mr. Chair, my intent with this one, we still have zoning pending. I plan to go to planning commission and talk about the potential for buffers between dispensaries. I think that's the #1 thing I hear from folks. We don't want one in every street corner. The easiest way to do that is in our zoning code. We can put it right in our zoning code that they have to be some distance apart. The state says at least a mile. We can make that 1.5 miles. We can make that 2 miles. And then we can ask our zoning department, how many will that how many will that allow? I think there's other things you can do with that zoning that would further restrict it. And I would certainly say, if that's the concern, gosh, that's the piece of legislation. I mean, it's literally zoning, right? It's designating where facilities can go. And I think that's our best tool to be able to really do this correctly.
No, again, I think that's where the difference lies, is I think the best tool is to have both of those spelled out together. But that's my opinion. Any other questions, other committees?
I just make a brief motion if it's acceptable. I think the safety director hinted at it, I think, and Mr. Chair, you hinted at it as well. I think the biggest concern I have is this legislation doesn't make any mention of any sort of licensing limitation. I think we had a broad discussion about this at the last council meeting, and I still am in favor of implementing that licensing limit as part of this legislation, and you know, for that reason, I would look to move forward with our ordinance that was brought forward at the last safety committee meeting that contained that licensing limit, so, thank you.
Any questions or comments on the audience?
Rochelle Bolton Smith, 237 Violet Court. I guess I'm confused between the legislation of this and CBD products, which seem to be available anywhere. And there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of control over vape shops and their servicing such products. So I wonder whether this is going to be included in that the discussion.
I'm afraid I'm taking back to the law director on that one, law director's office. I don't claim to have a wealth of background on different forms of marijuana.
It seems like a number of shops are sort of crossing the line of this.
Well, there are definitely two different situations, but do you want to address that?
This piece of legislation was contemplated in the recent past with that bill we've been talking about for a period of time from the state legislature. As far as what regulates CBD and what doesn't, this is primarily geared towards medical marijuana, adult use marijuana at that point in time. I don't know anything specific to this, but I think there's something that I discussed. That's the only law to decide, but I don't have any. So, yeah.
Thank you.
John?
Yeah, if I might just address, you know, we started to talk about whether a limit is appropriate, whether it's not, and quite frankly, it's really not relevant to this piece of legislation. I drafted this with the intent of, you know, creating information pathways for the safety director, creating mechanisms, you know, ensuring that we got access. The idea of a limit doesn't need to happen as part of this legislation, and if you support this legislation, that doesn't mean you can't later pass a limit when those licenses are gonna be issued, which is not until September. So the idea of saying I can't support licensing now because we don't have a limit in here, to me seems premature rejection of I think a pretty good piece of legislation when we're still waiting to see what's gonna happen with zoning, when we still don't even know how many licenses the state's gonna issue, and we know they're not even gonna start issuing them until after September. So the idea that we need a limit right now, to me, is premature, and it's quite frankly, it's bad law. Thank you.
Right.
You know, we've had this debate over and over again. We had it a long time ago with the case of medicinal marijuana, the dispensaries in that area. And that debate was long, lengthy and thorough. And I think that we got it right. There were no limits legislated within the licensing for medical marijuana. Those limits were imposed by the zoning. And I think, like I said, the zoning has been very, very effective in limiting where these facilities could open up and even limiting the number of facilities. Quite honestly, there's not that many places to be able to open up a facility. So with that, I will make a motion to adopt 24-20. 24-23. 24-23, I'm sorry. I was reading the first one I'm on. 24-23.
Do I hear a second? Second. Is that legislation?
You're the chair, we want.
Thank you.
Attorney?
No, we're gonna do. Mr. Chair.
I'd like to make a motion to take ordinance number 24-20 from the table, please.
Second.
Are we okay with that? Yes. Right. reconsider ordinance number 24-20, an ordinance amending chapter 850 of the codified ordinances.
Point of order,
Of
you
Newark.
gotta take it off the table and then you can read it. It has to be voted, it's non-debatable, remove it off the table.
So you made a motion to take it off the table, and you second one. So then we need to take a vote. All those in favor of taking this off the table, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay. Where was I? Reconsider ordinance number 24-20, an ordinance amending chapter 850 of the codified ordinances of the city of Newark, Ohio, to impose licensing requirements for adult use marijuana facilities, to limit the number of marijuana dispensaries operating within the city of Newark, Ohio, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Cannabis, aka marijuana, is now a legally controlled substance in the state of Ohio, just like alcohol. Prohibition, let me take you back a little bit in time. January 6th, 1932, the AP put something out on the press. Okay, and I'll share this with all of you, happy to, so you can look at it. 5 members of the Alcoholic Prohibition Research Committee depart on a bus named Diogenes, named after the man who sought in vain for an honest man in New York City, June 1st, 1932. The membership is seeking one drunk who has been reformed by the 18th Amendment in their campaign against the liquor ban. From left are Stephen Dever Jr., Assistant Investigator, Russell Salmon, Chief Investigator, Ernest Borland Jr., Member of the Executive Committee, Robert Nicholson, Assistant Director, and Paul Morris, the Director. Why do I have this framed, and why did I bring it with me? Russell Salmon is my grandfather. So it's in my blood to do what's right, and it's by the law. Pass that down. City of Newark, in 2016 November election, cannabis was decriminalized as a result. The illegal, now legally controlled substance cannabis is not tracked as a separate legal offense, has not been tracked by Newark or Licking County courts. However, alcohol is tracked as a separate drug in the offenses there. ODs, overdoses from cannabis, do occur. However, they are not life-threatening. They result in anxiety, panic attacks, palpitations, paranoia, and hallucinations. Meanwhile, someone who overdoses on alcohol can result in death, as well as the same symptoms as cannabis, the same ones aforementioned. In Newark, there are significantly less illness emergencies due to cannabis as compared to alcohol. Of the limited number of cannabis issues, most occur to those over the age of 50. Most of the time, they are edibles. Calls from services involving marijuana by the Newark Police Department in the last year or year to date, 82. Calls from services involving other drugs, 216. Calls from servicing involving alcohol, 560. Where's the problem? Most of my conversations with voters and citizens when this has been brought up in Newark have resulted in comments like, it doesn't bother me, I can choose to go or not go. But if it generates money for the city, great deal. How is it any different than alcohol now that it's legal? Why would anyone care if it generates revenue? I hope I do not have to drive somewhere else and support another community. Let's start with this legislation and the whereas clauses. If we number them 1 through 8 through the whereas clauses. The fifth one down, whereas talks about certain zoning restrictions to allow for the operation of facilities for cannabis. However, no zoning will be required because the language of the legislation states the only facilities would be at their current location, which means there are only 3 locations allowed in the city of Newark. The sixth one down, whereas talks about the need for the city of Newark to regulate further than the state of Ohio. The argument that cannabis is still illegal federally, implying the state should not usurp the federal government, but this whereas states that Newark should then usurp the state. The saying that voters only want the facilities in Ohio, the state of Ohio, and not in Newark. Well, I think voters are smart enough to realize that if they voted yes on the issue, then it would be available in their city. I would never imply citizens don't know what they were voting for and only voted to make it legal in the entire state except for Newark. But in case you don't know the numbers, I do have the numbers. The only ward that did not vote in favor was the 6th ward, in which Mr. Lang has even indicated that he is well aware of that, but that's why he wants to control it.
He meant 5th ward.
Or 5th ward, excuse me, 5th ward. The 1st ward and the 7th ward both unanimously voted for it. 68%, 32% in the 1st ward. The 7th ward was 66%, 34%. The other wards were all above 50%. The closest one was my ward, was at 51%, 51.49. All the others were anywhere from 56 to 64%. We do need control over controlled substances within our city, though. I do agree with that. Comments about comparing these facilities to vape shops and skilled gaming because those facilities attracted illegal activities. I agree, they did. These facilities are trying to sell a legally controlled substance. They would not want illegal types of drugs or illegal activities near their facilities. That would risk their license with the state of Ohio and their ability to sell what they're trying to sell. Because it would be a direct competition. They will police it more than the city will have to police it, just like the medical has. Plus, we have had only 1 incident at any of the 3 current facilities, and that's when somebody tried to entice our Newark Police Department to do something wrong. It had nothing to do with the facility. They just used that facility to stage what they were trying to do as far as entrapment of our NPD. There were no violations or any laws broken at that time. Section 3780.25. I'm going to read it. A, the legislative authority of a municipal corporation may adopt an ordinance, or a board of township trustees may adopt a resolution by majority vote to prohibit or limit the number of adult use cannabis operators permitted under this chapter within a municipal corporation or within the unincorporated territory of a township respectively. Nowhere does it authorize a municipality to only allow a particular set of individuals. It does not authorize that only if you have a current license can you do it. It says the number or prohibit. Nowhere does it authorize a municipality to allow at a current location, specifying that you can only do business right here. Discrimination is not against the law, as such discrimination is justifiable through fact, such as actuarial evidence, statistics, and even there's AI getting involved in fact finding. In this situation, the city is unfairly discriminating against current users by stating they can only operate if they do not move. Currently, 2 of them could be in violation of the adult use Ohio law, which indicates they cannot operate within a mile radius of each other. Not allowing one of them to move may cause one of them to not be allowed to operate just because of their current location. Nothing to support that moving to a new location would cause any type of harm to the community. If not forced to move, they would still be allowed to operate. They could sue the city. Plus, do we want local government to have the power of the exact location where somebody has to do business in order to stay in operations? Further, if not allowed to move, a landlord has them over a barrel, as a landlord can then increase their rent, knowing the entity cannot relocate or they could lose their business. The business owner could sue the city because they put them into that position. Stating that only 3 current entities can operate in this municipality is unfairly discriminated against other entities without just cause. Other entities could file discrimination suits for allowing only those in possession of a medical license can have an adult use cannabis license. Plus, it is not authorized, like indicated by the Ohio Revised Code. The Law Director's Office drafted the legislation that puts the city at risk of litigation with little to no defense to legal allegations or wrongdoing. The ordinance in front of you that you're discussing right now, which was drafted by the Newark Law Director's Office, demonstrates a bias against legally controlled substance in the state of Ohio. The Law Director's Office refused to assist Councilman Lang's legislation, which opposed the legislation biased towards cannabis, a legally controlled substance. They would not provide any legal opinion on the subject matter of his drafted legislation, and the email was sent to Councilman Lang indicated they would only approve the form and would not provide any legal assistance. Due to the biased nature of the Law Director's Office and discriminatory language that puts the city at risk, the city of Newark at risk of litigation, I believe this council should get an unbiased legal opinion from an independent source before moving on with this legislation. I believe that this city has to have a legal opinion. I've run this past 2 attorneys and a judge, and they indicated that it does not authorize the city of Newark to be able to limit to only a specific type and at a specific location. It allows you to prohibit or limit the number, but you cannot say who can get those specific licenses. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from the committee? So, Director Hickman, would you be interested in speaking with this one?
So one thing to clarify is I had a conversation last week with one of the 3 dispensaries called and was asking some questions. Councilman Lang mentioned that licenses aren't going to be issued until September. Not in their thinking. They're thinking that they're open by the 1st of July, that they will have clearance from the state. So I just wanted to make everybody clear on that. No one's proposing a ban. We've never said that, no one's ever said that we don't want this. Our concern is the what is this going to do to an already strained first responder system? Okay, we don't know. Councilman Marmy brought up several different numbers. Whatever those numbers are, and whatever form adult use cannabis comes in, those numbers aren't going to go down. It's going to create more calls for service. So our concern, where we're coming from on this, and we got some advice from the state of Ohio on this, or the police department did, is proceed with caution. You can always expand this. Expansion's easy. But if we get too far out in front of it, and we find out this isn't working, and we have to try to retract it, in my perspective, that's where we've got a big problem. So this isn't about dams. It's not about any hidden agendas or anything like that. It is out of an abundance of concern for our safety forces.
Any questions? for Safety Director? Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who would like to? Is there anyone else who would like to address? Ready?
One quick clarification, I was speaking to, adult use only licenses, so the practical effect of enforcing this dispensary limit, right, is to prevent somebody from getting a state license that is only operating as an adult use. Those licenses are not being issued before September. So in my view, this is not an appropriate use of the emergency clause because we don't have an emergency. There's nobody other than the medical dispensaries that are able to apply and get licenses right now. And that's not gonna change before September. So that is the first thing I wanted to clarify. I think there's a lot of talk of, well, we just wanna be conservative now and, we can open it up later. That's fine, but that's not what this legislation says. This is a permanent piece of legislation. There is no time limit. I've suggested time limits. Nobody wanted to put one in there. So this piece of legislation goes on in perpetuity. To take further action by council, and as I know from my private practice, you need to look at the words on the page. You can't assume what people are gonna do in the future. You can't agree to bad law, bad language. Because with the idea of, hey, down the road, we can fix this. Just fix it now. Just put in a limit. Say it's only gonna last for a year. It addressed Mr. Marmy's comments by, relative to 378025 by, instead of saying it's these three specific operators at these three locations, putting in a limit of how many adult use licenses we're gonna issue. That would be another way to do this that is much more in keeping with what the state of Ohio said we can do, which is limit the number, not say who those licenses go to. There's some other issues that I think need to be cleaned up with this, and quite frankly, this is kind of what happens when you take somebody else's piece of legislation, slap some other terms on it, throw it on the agenda. I don't understand why we are still removing the definition of medical marijuana dispensaries, because that's used later on. I'm surprised we don't have a definition for adult use dispensaries. That wasn't included. Why do we have the whole idea of the safety director rejecting a license? If we're gonna say it's these three, and we're all in agreement, these are the three, why do we need to have a whole other process for rejecting a license if we're gonna limit it? So to me, it's not, you can't just take a piece of legislation, slap something on it, and this is how we're gonna do it. You gotta go through all of the terms and make sure everything ticks and ties together. And I just think there's a lot of pieces missing here. And again, I would go back to what we still don't know. And none of that's changed since 2 weeks ago, right? We haven't had our planning commission meeting yet. We don't know when the state is gonna issue licenses outside of medical. We don't even know how many licenses the state's gonna issue. Or how many of our these three places are gonna get a license. There's time to do this later on. I'm not saying if you don't pass this tonight, you can't do it later on. There's time to do this later on, certainly as an emergency, certainly before they start issuing licenses, which again, we're at least 90 days out from. So I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Deputy Chief Logan, Newark Police Department. I just want to echo, Safety Director said, in line with him on this ordinance. I'd like to elaborate a little bit on what he said. Lincoln County has a chiefs meeting every month where all the command staff, so we represent command staff comes in and we all meet at different locations throughout the county. We also have a bunch of people that go from state agencies, maybe with us too, to update us on what's going on in the state. Like Director Hickman alluded to, we have a gentleman that is in the Division of Cannabis Controls to the Ohio Department of Commerce. He updates us every month on what's going on. And what he said is, just wait. He said, every day something changes over there. Something comes up, somebody pushes this, somebody pushes that. They don't know what the final outcome is gonna be, because every day something's changing. He tries to keep us up to date, but he's saying, be very cautious about doing anything, because you don't know what the rules and what's gonna happen yet. Because they're not even sure. So I just want to clarify that.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I wanna agree with what Deputy Director Logan just said, just wait till we find out everything. I agree 110%. That's exactly what we should do.
Mr. Chair, thank you. We debated this out a lot last safety committee as far as opinions on either side of it, so I don't want to get into that too much, but there was a point brought up at the last committee meeting, and Director Hickman kind of elaborated on this already, that there's some discussion that we're introducing prohibition again and some reference to that. I'm not sure where that's coming from. I don't see anywhere in this legislation that we're not going to have recreational marijuana licenses available for the 3 medical facilities if we were banning it outright. Maybe that's a fair point, I don't know. But that's not what's being discussed here. So I'm not really sure where that's coming from. There were a lot of statistics read about alcohol being more problematic. I'm not an expert in that regard. Maybe it is. That doesn't change the fact that I think being cautious in this regard, as has been mentioned multiple times, is still the best route forward. I agree, alcohol may have its problems and challenges. I don't disagree with that at all. I don't think that really goes against the point that was made here. There were also discussions made about generating revenue for the city being a positive thing. I think that's true. It's important for us to have revenue from taxes to run the city, but I think it's also important that we want to make sure that we have we're also protecting our city and having the right kind of businesses that we want. I think that's a goal we need to also run alongside that. That's all that I want to cover. I know we had a lot of discussion at the last safety committee meeting, debating the point back and forth, but I did want to comment on that. And also, I guess the other thing I'd mention is that the law director was certainly, as mentioned, involved in drafting this legislation. I think I'm no expert on this, but since we are limiting the number of licenses issued, I feel like that would apply within that paragraph of the Ohio Revised Code. I'm no expert on that. That's why I leave that up to the law director's office. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, does the law director's office have any comment?
Madam President, I was not involved in the drafting of this at this juncture. I will leave that to Ms. Moore at a future period of time, but I appreciate it.
Sir.
On behalf of the law director's office, can I ask you a question?
Sir.
I generally speaking, when we have the discretion to be more prescriptive than a state statute with respect to, what they are broadly defining.
Yeah, certainly, in hearing the definition of what was being discussed in that revised code section, there is a lot of deference that is being given to municipalities, to townships, and things of that nature. There's some discussion about, duration of this, what you can do, what you can't. Personally, I've never met a piece of legislation that can't be changed, amended at any period of time. So I think that ball was in your court as safety council, city council at large to address it as you see fit.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I just wanted to offer. Section B, the limit, we are saying it is, we are doing this pursuant to the authority given to us under 378025. We are going beyond the authority given to us in 378025 when we say these three operators specifically at these 3 locations. We are going beyond, and we are setting ourselves up for a potential lawsuit from somebody who can't get a renewal lease from their landlord and now can't move to any other location. We could potentially be sued by somebody who comes in, let's say only 2 of these facilities get adult use and the 3rd one wants to come in. They have a potential lawsuit against us because we're saying the number, but you don't qualify because you're not in one of these locations and you're not one of these 3 operators. So I think there are some questions here that I have not spoken directly to the law director. Mr. Marmy pointed these out to me just this week, so I don't think it's anything that she's had a chance to weigh in. So do with that what you will. Just want to offer that. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Any other? Yes, ma'am. Right, I had to give your name and address. Sorry.
Okay.
I think I've had done that once tonight.
Oh, okay. In terms of medical marijuana, as opposed to adult distributory services, is there any requirement for monitoring for health effects? For instance, one of the side effects of medical marijuana in general, especially because of the lack of control of quantity, is lung and heart defects. Is there any control in that respect with these dispensaries? In terms of liability?
Not that I'm aware of, but once again, I don't think I'm the person to ask that of. I'm not sure how that is determined.
I would say that that's beyond the scope of the city government.
You know, yeah, it's
Okay, curious, thank you.
Right.
Yes, thank you. To answer questions as far as why the comparison to prohibition, they, when it all came about, limiting of it, everything, it's all about thinking that the problem will go away if we make it illegal. The thing is that I'm in agreement with the law. You either want to prohibit or limit the number. The reason why the prohibition is that there are council members that have told other council members that they want to prohibit it. And so I want to make sure we just don't go that direction either. If something is not, if it is, goes a little bit different direction. I know this current legislation does not say prohibit, but I am aware that there are folks that do want to prohibit. And so I just wanted to make sure that that argument was out there to begin with. I don't believe that limiting, in a matter of being discriminatory towards things. Everything else that we do in the city with businesses, we limit based on zoning. And we limit because we don't want it near our churches, we don't want it near our schools, we don't want it within a certain, density, or it has to be within a certain area. I just want to make sure that we are being fair. Do I want to see these on every street corner? No, I do not. Do I think that 3 is enough? Yeah, I think it'll serve the community. And I believe that we'll also get some outsiders coming in, and I believe they're gonna use Walmart. I believe they're gonna go to Home Depot. I believe they're gonna go to all the other restaurants in that area if they do visit our municipality, the city of Newark. Do I believe that it'll be a huge, big boom as far as economic development? No, but every little bit helps when it comes to economic development. I want to do it fairly, non-discriminatory, and I want to make sure that we're pro-business and we're not that government entity that wants to just control. We want to manage, we don't want to control business. We want to manage our city, and I agree with Mr. Hauser. We want to make sure that we don't have a huge density. I mean, why are the streets so wide on Main Street? Anybody know the history? Because they wanted to make sure they're wide enough so the 18-horse wagons full of beer could turn around. And there was nothing but brothels all the way down Main Street. That's the history of Main Street and why it's so wide. So we want to do things that are right for our community. Yes, we want to make sure that our community is not littered with certain things. We've done that with other businesses and limiting the zoning code. I believe that's the best avenue. I've done research. I'm no attorney, but I did a lot of research on this. I didn't see anything that really showed the limitation of a business in which anybody said that they can only be in one location. I see it all being done with zoning. However, I still see lawsuits with zoning even, because it can't be unfairly discriminatory. There have been cities and municipalities that have been sued because of their zoning codes. Newark has a good one. Ours is pretty ironclad. It's been very, very well tested, well thought out. Especially, we changed it here just years back. It hasn't been too long ago. The old one was just antiquated, wasn't up to date with all the new different types of businesses. I believe that that's the direction to go. I believe that's the way we limit it, or we just limit it to just 3. Don't be specific. That violates what we're doing, that's or what the law allows, 3780.25 allows.
Definitely.
Or are we adding, the presence of churches to, restricting marijuana usage?
Are we doing what?
Why is our church positioning of, locations of churches, come as a factor? I can see the schools in that we want to discourage, children from, being affected, but I'm questioning the, where churches are involved.
I believe that's already, stated. I think that's part of the, there are so many regulations, 500 feet to 1,000 feet, and that's not just the schools, it's other things as well.
We used to have no liquor on Sundays. And that's changed, and that was because of separation of church and state. Why are churches a factor?
Why are churches
A
affected?
factor in the position of where,
Planning seems to have the answer.
Okay, I'm not sure I'm qualified to answer that question.
Mr. Chair, if I may, she's speaking to the zoning legislation, which is really not on the table before you guys. We just copied what the state had, because they had those same categories, so we just used the same. That's what we did back when we had medical. We just used the same categories that the state was already prohibiting. Since it was gonna be 500 feet for the state, we just expanded.
okay,
That's
I
okay.
see the schools, but I cannot.
We made it
see
1,000.
Yeah, we
And churches are added because they have Bible study classes with children, they have other things like activities that involve children. There's a lot of activities that they do not want that type of activity around because of the influence of children.
Thank you.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to adopt ordinance 2420.
We have a second.
Oh, second.
All those in favor of?
Mr. Chair, could I address?
Sure.
Thank you. So I'm gonna restate my concerns with this. Doug, I appreciate you bringing this in. That's really cool. I like that. Pretty awesome. Should this legislation pass today and then go on to council, and then pass the council, I'm sure it's gonna be on the front page of the newspaper. And I want you guys all to take that page and frame it like this. Because it'll be a point in history that we're all gonna want to remember. And the point in history is gonna be the day that the Newark City Council and the Newark City government began its trek towards socialism. Look up the definition of socialism as you want, if you want. I don't know about the prohibition, but for a government to come through and say who can win, who can lose, that is socialist. That is a socialist government. For us to say that this person and that person can operate here, but that person and that person cannot, or nobody else cannot, that is socialism. That is wrong. That is not what this government is supposed to be. That is not what any of us were elected to be. And I won't participate in passing anything that has those types of restrictions. I have no problems with restricting the number of licenses. I have no problems with it at all. Or restricted to 3, restricted to 3. You know, restricted to 5, restricted to 5. I don't care. I do have a problem with restricted to 1 because I don't want a legislative monopoly That's the same thing I said for medicinal marijuana. If you wanna restrict it to 3, that's fine. But to say who can and cannot have those licenses, I think that's wrong. I'm done.
Goodbye.
Yeah, just one final thing I wanted to clarify, as the only elected official here who can say that my constituents actually did not support issue 2. Want to make it very clear, I am not in favor of letting the streets run wild and putting these things on every street corner. I have worked very hard to try to bring forth sensible legislation, both in terms of our zoning and our licensing, that I think fairly regulates this in Newark. And my opposition to what you guys are about to vote on is not in any way having to do with whether I disagree with having a limit or not having a limit. I think it's just bad law. I've tried to point out several issues. Mr. Marmy has pointed out several issues. I would love to see those addressed by the folks who are in favor of this. If not, then it's clear to me that we don't really care about passing bad law. We just want to get things through and get them done. So I would hope that folks would at least listen to the concerns that we've raised and the possible future ramifications of adopting this as written, limiting these to where they are today forever. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we've heard a fair amount of discussion on a fairly broad view of issues, all the way from the width of Main Street or our march towards socialism. But I really think what we're after here is to deal with one concept, and that is safety. And I think our director of safety, our police are trying to enforce it. We want to start this in a very slow manner. We want to start where we've had success with the 3 locations for marijuana. I'm not aware of any problems that have been from that. And I think that's where the natural, to me, would be the natural place to start. And we can always expand. I haven't seen a piece of legislation in 9 years it can't be amended. It can be amended, but you start slow, you start cautiously, and we try to do this in a manner that gives the most safety to the city of Newark. That's all I've got. Thanks.
Sir,
Pam.
yeah, just one last comment. These decisions are not being made outside of citizen guidance. I've spoken to many, they've called me, they've emailed me, we've sat down. And they know this is a legislation of moving parts. Okay, they know infrastructure is part of it. They know zoning is part of it. But their largest concern is community impact. And they are trusting us to go slow. Not only for the business of the city, but for the livelihood of their families, because that's why we're here. We're not here to stand or to yell about, things that happened 150 years ago, but we're here right now to be Newark first. We are Newark first. We are here for our families. We were elected and put here by our families. And so it's for them that I'm voting for this.
Norman?
Yes, Mr. Chair, given the time.
Can I ask for the law director's legal opinion on my comments on what I believe to be, illegal on, as far as the language that's in there going further?
Mr. Chair, I think he's already commented that he has not drafted the legislation.
Point of order, I addressed the chair, not Mr. Hauser. Can I ask for the law department, law director's office legal opinion?
If the law director's office is willing to speak to this, that'd be fine.
I respectfully decline that opportunity because again, I'm not the one that drafted this. And I had the conversations that each of the council people present here today had with Ms. Moore. And should be more competent party to address those concerns.
So how can we proceed if the law director's office can't give a legal opinion about my concerns about the legality of it? And I've had other attorneys tell me that it was not. How can we still proceed?
I think the only way we can proceed is what's the issues that are in front of us, what's written in front of us, and what we think we have to either vote for or against. And I think we've certainly heard from a wide range of viewpoints. Mr. Hauser, you were starting to say something.
No, I just wanted to make a comment, that there is a motion on the floor, and given the time constraints, I don't think it might make sense to call that vote. That's it.
All those, and let's do a roll call. That'd be fine. Mr. Hauser,
Yes.
Mr. Blind,
Yes,
Rath,
No.
Yes.
and I will vote yes also. That is, that passes, and it's stated 4-1. That concludes safety committee. Thank you.